GM, GM. Bitcoin Bulls, welcome. Today is Wednesday, the 28th of February. Not the last day of the month. We do have a leap year. So, massive day for BlackRock specifically. 520 million on their inflows. The total was 576, so that's including the rest of them and excluding Grayscale 125 outflow. So huge day overall, but a massive day specifically for BlackRock. Their biggest day on record, I believe, unless they had a bigger day earlier, but I don't think they did. And what happens next? Well, I think obviously this is going to continue. Maybe not to the exact same degree, but there's no signs of this slowing down. It's actually accelerating in terms of the institutional FOMO for Bitcoin. And I think what's really big is going to be next month and the month after when we find out who's been buying. That's like, I've said this now for weeks. This is the cycle where you hear about everyone buying Bitcoin. And this is the kind of stuff that can catalyze a move above 100K. Because last time there was Michael Saylor, who nobody knew, and then Elon, who everybody knows. But nobody followed up after Elon. And then Elon started to foot it, right? He bought through Tesla, but then a few months later he's like, oh, maybe we won't keep it. It's not environmentally friendly, blah, blah, blah. Now it's just like, if you don't have Bitcoin, you're behind. If you don't own some Bitcoin, you're falling behind. And I think that level of FOMO is going to be just insane. It is the world's only truly scarce asset that has, no borders. It's easy to transport. And it is a genuine alternative to the monetary system. Like, a lot of times we get really bogged down in our trading day by day. But you forget that. Like, you can forget that there is nothing else that serves the purpose of Bitcoin. Gold doesn't. Because you can't transport gold from here to, from Europe to America in a matter of seconds or minutes. And that's really, really, really powerful. The portability, the composable, or the fractional nature where you can split it down into fucking one sat and send it anywhere. I mean, I'm trying to paint this picture now because this is the story that they're going to start telling. And it's going to send Bitcoin just absolutely into overdrive. Now, we're already in what looks like overdrive. But all I can say is we're not. Because it's this weird phenomenon where when Bitcoin's accelerating, this is definitely acceleration, right? When Bitcoin's accelerating, it can go, like, this is how crazy it is. Like, your weekly candle can turn from this into 65 just without, in the blink of an eye. It spends so little time doing this, like, in general, right? You look at how many big, I call them God candles we had. So since 23 started, we had 1 over here, 2 over here, 3 over here, 4, this one. None of these were. You could say this one, although it didn't break above resistance. And this is the 5th one. So only 5 really since in the past 14 months, where you had significant, 10% plus weekly candles. And, as you see in the past, they don't come along that often. Even here, like this maybe was one. Where we go from 15, close to 20. Yeah, that was a big one. Most of these were just steady climbing. And there we go, boom. We had like 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row. And then we had 1, 2, 3 in a row. And this is it, right? This is Bitcoin. And we've just came from a consolidation. We're not actually on 3 in a row. We had 2, and then we had a nice inside week. It wasn't actually an inside week. It took out the highs. But my point is, if you're already long, you just stay long. I've been getting a few questions from people saying, like, Michael, when would you consider taking profit on Bitcoin spot? I'm like, not even. considering it at this point. No, not for Bitcoin and not on spot. I'm trading longs as well, and I'll take profit on longs for sure. I've been taking profit on and off all the way. But this is just ripping through every key level that, was on the chart. And for me on the lower time frames, Bitcoin's above this pivot now. So I look at it now, obviously assuming something like what we're seeing here doesn't happen, which, by the way, for me, I don't think it's going to turn around and just go straight down. What's most concerning to me is if this happens, if we push up and then we go sideways for several days after a push, let's say we push above 60, back below 60 and consolidate, that's where I could see it opening up for a sell-off, right? So obviously we're not blind here. Sell-offs can happen and they will happen. But when Bitcoin's in this acceleration phase, it's crazy. Like it can go anywhere. It can go anywhere. And I would guess, like, given that we've just gone up, 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 and in 3 days we've gone from 50 to 60, I would guess that moving from 50 to 60 in 3 days would probably encourage some people to sell at 60. But I said last week that 50K wasn't resistance when we came up to it here, and we went straight through it and then never touched it again. And that wasn't like me predicting the future or anything like that. I said it very clearly at the time. I said, why would you sell? The only thing that makes the market go down are spot sellers for any significant sell-off, right? You can have a flush, like a leverage flush, just because there's too many longs, but that'll get bought up. If the only reason we've had a 10% dip is because too many leverage positions got liquidated, spot buyers are going to step in and buy that. When you see some sustained spot selling, that's when you get actual weakness, and that's when you get a proper that's where you get a proper sell-off or a break of structure or whatever. So my point was, at the stage we're at in the cycle, when we got to 50, why would anybody sell? They'd just gotten their biggest weekly confirmation, right, with this massive weekly close above 48. And then we were pushing towards 50. And that to me, like I said, that said to people, we don't sell now. We don't sell our spot. And just like I'm saying, no, I'm not touching my spot sales. I want to buy more Bitcoin, as does everyone else. Because we've seen this game before, and the real fun starts after all-time high. Now, we are absolutely speed running the 4-year cycle, if you believe in the 4-year cycle. It's not really even about belief in the 4-year cycle, it's will the 4-year cycle play out again? Well, we've broken it so far. This is breaking the 4-year cycle in terms of we are never this close to all-time high before the halving. We don't normally hit all-time high till 6 months after the halving, and a month and a half before it, we're pushing towards that level. So, in terms of paths and stuff, I'll talk more about that on the monthly preview, which will drop tomorrow or Friday. But I would just say sit back and enjoy the show. If you're spot long, or if you even have longs open on top of that, just sit back and enjoy it. If you've got leverage longs open, have your stops in, be ready to take profit. Like a lot of people are going to look at and they're going to talk about the funding rates going crazy. Absolutely. But this is all part of it, right? So when Bitcoin is accelerating like this, nobody wants to short it. So when I talk about momentum, it's really important to remember that what makes a market go down. I just told you that no one's going to sell their spot. And like, why would they? Why would anyone sell their spot bags whenever it's pushing towards 60 and all-time highs now is basically a guarantee in people's minds? Maybe not right now, but at some point. So there's very little reason to sell because all the places Bitcoin should have rejected from, it didn't. So it should have rejected from 50. It should have rejected from 48. It should have rejected from 42 if you're listening to the bears, right? We should have went down after the ETF launch. We didn't. So now we're at 60. People are like, well, doesn't this just mean that Bitcoin is even more probable, even more likely to not just go to all-time high, but 100K and all that other stuff? And I agree. Yes, it is true. It is right. So now you're seeing spikes of open interest. You're seeing like just generally high OI across alts. and high funding rate across alts. That's all true. And there's going to be shakeouts, there's going to be leverage flushes. But to focus in on Bitcoin specifically, when it's actually going up like this, the reason why it keeps going up in the short term, and we will come back and fill these gaps later at some point. I'm sure we see 56 and 55 and 54 again. Like, I think we can go there. I'm not fucking deluded. Maybe we don't, but I would say we can definitely see moves back down. Like, we're not going to be idiot moon boys here. But whenever nobody wants to sell their spot, which I feel pretty confident that people still don't want to sell their spot, okay, that's one source of selling pressure gone. People are buying spot every single day to the tune of hundreds of millions through the ETFs, right? So there's demand. Then on the perp side, obviously everyone's getting long. People have been shorting this, as you can see, that both pumps had a leverage liquidation, pump liquidation, moved up. It looked like this was all, longs FOMOing in. A little bit came off, but then away we go again. And now we're finally seeing open interest rise as price rises. So now you're kind of in this musical chairs part where anyone who's come in here, you can see very clearly that 14.6 to about 800 million of positions have opened in these last 3 hours. And that's all above 57. So if you've like opened a leverage long above 57, you're not safe, right? Don't get me wrong. There's no way that somebody FOMOing in here is safe in their position over the next few weeks. But in the short term, nobody wants to short, right? So if nobody wants to short because look at it, you're going to get blown out. That will make funding rise. So funding doesn't have to go up only because people are getting stupid on leverage. There's a lack of spot selling and there's a lack of perp selling because nobody wants to sell into and nobody wants to short into a rising market because they did that over here and got wrecked and got wrecked and got wrecked. Now, this is like a short-term thing. This is daily levels, right? So I'm not saying that we go up only forever. The point of this is that remains true as long as Bitcoin is accelerating. And then it's reflexive, meaning the higher it goes, the higher it goes. And the higher it goes, the more people think it's going to go up. And the reason for that, it becomes self-fulfilling, is because the higher it goes, the less people want to short it because where the fuck do you short? You just get wrecked. And the more that people want to long it because look, it's going up and you're getting rewarded. So while that's moving like that, you have this really reflexive, aggressive pump. And where is it going to end? No one knows. And there's no point guessing. This is one of the worst things you can do. Like, I could say, yeah, it'll hit 60 and reverse. But I can say, like, it should, it might, it maybe will, it could. Like, all those are probabilities. But don't listen to anyone who's telling you that they know where it's going to stop. Because these same people told you that 57 was enough, 56 was enough, it's going to pull back, 58 was the big level. Just let it do its thing. On the low time frames, I have this pivot at 58.3. We found resistance at it, so you can see that was valid. It touched it, broke through it, retested it, dipped below, back above. And here we go. It provided almost no resistance. When you just rip through pivot levels like that, that's really, really, that's really strong. So if we go back down to the previous one, which is fucking all the way down here at 48, you can see what happens with price when it comes to those levels, right? Price came up to the 48, sold off initially, flipped it. See how well it respects this level. Resistance, flips to support, dips below it, and then away we go. Didn't even make it back for a retest. If it doesn't spend much time around there, and especially if it breaks through it easily, that's a sign that the market's really strong. And 40.8 did the same thing back on the low time frames when we first broke through it. I'll actually go to an hourly chart to see this one now. 40.8 did the exact same thing. Where are we? Here we go. Came up to it initially, touched it, had it on the 1 hour chart, briefly resistance, broke straight through it, pushed on to 45, nuked back down, and it held, and it held, and it held, and it held again over here. And then we had a quick sweep below it, and away it goes. So all the way, 34.9 was the other one. I've been talking about these for months. Resistance. As soon as we flipped that on the low time frames, and were able to actually break above it, that was a big sign from the market that when it got back above it again, away it goes. And where did it retest on the flush? Exactly there. So depending how high we go on low time frames, I've got my eyes on this 58.3 pivot. Like if price were to go higher and then have a flush out like that, I could see that being our springboard towards all time highs potentially. But that's like a low time frame thing. I don't know. And for me, I just think let the market do its thing. Again, I've said this since 40 and 50 and now heading towards 60. If you think it's going to go to 100K, and I do, like, I think, just think of it now. We're not even at the halving yet, and we're touching 60. So, of course, we can sell off, and we will sell off. And if you're using too much leverage, there's going to be a 20% dip at some point that, like, takes people out. But if we're already at 60, then 100 becomes just really, really clear and achievable in most people's minds. And that's how it sort of becomes self-fulfilling to that extent. I still think that we can spend many months chopping here. Like if we spent 50 to 69, right? So from 50K to all time high, if we spent 6 months chopping in that area, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Building a base for a bigger breakout. It doesn't have to go breaking out all time high now and that's it. If you're not on board, you're fucked. Like, it doesn't have to do that. There's a million different paths it can take. But if you think that the whole point of this is that Bitcoin goes much higher, then it's just a matter of time, really. And also, so there's another thing. Bitcoin is the best proxy for global liquidity because Bitcoin's a global asset. It's not traded in the US alone. It's traded all across the world. When you look at the global liquidity, which has been at all-time highs for months, right? So it broke the March 23 or April 23 highs back in December. So December into January, February, March, global liquidity is at all-time highs. Okay? Bitcoin's not. So from that measure, and Bitcoin is the best measure because it's a pure monetary asset. It was created to directly in response to reckless money printing. And it is the best direct proxy that we have for global liquidity. So you could argue that Bitcoin needs to go higher. If global liquidity is at all-time highs, why is Bitcoin not? This could be, from that perspective, just a catch-up trade. People think, the way to look, at least the way I view liquidity, it's not like if liquidity goes up this week, that means Bitcoin goes up. If liquidity goes down this week, that means it's bad for Bitcoin. It's not tracking it one-to-one in an instant. But if there's more liquidity in the global financial system than there's ever been, then Bitcoin should be at all-time highs. And so it looks crazy because it's just accelerating, but it doesn't seem that crazy when you take the context of liquidity. And this, we've got a day left, so let's see how it closes. But if this monthly closes at the highs, that's another breakaway candle. That's just huge. That's setting up a potential for all-time high next month, which is wild. But let's see. There's still work to do. The highest monthly close we've ever had was 61,200 over here. We're already on track for our second highest monthly close ever, right? That was 58.8. We're just above that. Again, there's still, a day and a half left. So we'll see. But, it's just fucking a sight to behold. We only get this a couple of times per cycle. So just enjoy it when it comes. Bitcoin dominance, after people thought that it was alt season and Bitcoin's done and dominance is over, let's all get ourselves into alts. Bitcoin dominance says, hold my beer. So looking at that as well, watching for that to break out, that's when the fun really begins for Bitcoin. And after that, I've been saying this for weeks or months, like I think 60% or something around that for Bitcoin dominance would make sense as the cycle top, right? And that's it. And then money really flows into alts as Bitcoin can continue higher, but money would flow into alts probably at that point. Although I'm gonna actually delete that because I do think Bitcoin dominance will top, but my main case for this year is that Bitcoin and Ethereum vastly outperform most alts. And if we get altcoin outperformance probably next year, the reason for that is there's just so much money flowing into Bitcoin from Wall Street. And there's going to be, assuming if ETH gets ETFs in May, there's going to be billions flowing into ETH as well. And this is the institutional cycle. Like, this is it. This is when Wall Street buy our bags. And from that perspective, I can see how Bitcoin has even more of a sustained dominance run. I mean, it might just keep grinding higher and higher for most of this year and maybe top out end of the year. Maybe going into next year, we see the real altcoin push, and then we have whatever cycle bottom there is. This isn't like a chart you want to do TA on. Obviously, it's not like a tradable chart, but Bitcoin dominance is trending up. We had that massive reversal. I talked about it on Monday. I said, watch Bitcoin dominance in the New York session. Watch ETH BTC in the New York session. ETH BTC is getting absolutely wrecked on the low time frame. And when I say wrecked, again, it's just like the path we drew. It's not, ETH BTC is still most likely to be bottoming out. But when I said this, I was saying, well, why would ETH continue to smash Bitcoin going towards the halving? I wouldn't be surprised if ETH sees a little bit of sideways or down before the halving, and then it takes over, after Bitcoin's halving's out of the way. Then ETH has more catalysts with ETFs, etc., and it's in a better position to outperform. So that's it. I would say just keep watching Bitcoin dominance, keep watching ETH BTC. If ETH keeps underperforming Bitcoin on the low time frames, if Bitcoin dominance keeps rising, if Bitcoin is outpacing the market, if total is looking like this, and if total looks like this, total 3 looks like this, right, which is still going up, still looking good, but Bitcoin's leading. Just enjoy the show. GM, GM, GM.